The notification came at 7:14 on a Thursday evening, and I almost didn't see it. I was standing in my kitchen in my socks, zipping up my overnight bag, already mentally rehearsing the 4-hour drive north. The forecast said snow flurries past Barrie, so I had packed an extra layer, my heavy wool socks, the ones my dad used to call my Muskoka armor. I was thinking about him, about how strange it still felt to be going to the cottage without him waiting on the dock with a thermos of coffee. I was thinking about grief, and about second chances, and about whether my brother Derek and I could finally stop circling each other long enough to grieve together. Then Patricia texted. Patricia Chen had been my father's accountant for 19 years. She was methodical and careful and rarely used her phone for anything other than scheduling. So when her name appeared on my screen with a message that was not a meeting request, I stopped moving entirely. Do not get in that car. Call me right now. Do not tell Derek I reached out. I read it 3 times. Then I read the second message that came through while I was reading the first. This is not about the numbers, sweetheart. This is about you. My overnight bag hit the floor. I sat down on the edge of the kitchen chair, the one that still wobbled because my dad kept saying he'd fix it and never did, and I called her. She picked up before the first ring finished. Are you still home? Her voice was not the voice she used for quarterly reviews. Yes, I said. Good. I heard her exhale. I need you to listen to me very carefully, and I need you not to react until I'm done. Can you do that? I said I could. I'm not sure I believed it. What Patricia told me in the next 6 minutes rearranged the last 2 years of my life like furniture being dragged across a hardwood floor. The noise of it was enormous. The marks it left were permanent. She had been reviewing the estate documents my father left behind. Routine work, she said. The kind of administrative follow-through that grief delays and lawyers eventually force you to finish. But 3 days ago, she had found a discrepancy. A second version of the property transfer letter. Not the one my father had written in his own handwriting. The one I had read sitting beside his hospital bed 6 weeks before he died. The one where he said the Muskoka cottage was mine. Specifically, and only mine, because he knew I was the one who would keep it the way he loved it. There was a second version, typed, with a signature that Patricia said made her stomach turn. She had spent 48 hours being certain before she called me. The notary Derek has retained for tomorrow's signing, she said carefully, is not licensed in Ontario. I checked the Law Society registry twice. The license number on his letterhead belongs to a notary who retired in 2019 and passed away in 2021. The room went very quiet. The documents Derek wants you to sign tomorrow, Patricia continued, include a clause that transfers your interest in the Muskoka property to him as sole surviving heir, waiving all future claims. The language is buried on page 7. It reads like a standard liability waiver. Most people wouldn't catch it. Most people. She meant me. She was being kind about it. If you sign those papers tomorrow, she said, the cottage is gone. And because the transfer would be notarized even by a fraudulent notary, contesting it would take years and cost more than the property is worth. Derek knows that. He has known that since before your father's funeral. I put my hand flat on the kitchen table and pressed down hard to stop it from shaking. Patricia, I said, how long have you known something was wrong? A pause. The kind that carries weight. I had suspicions for about 4 months, she said quietly. I didn't have proof until Tuesday. I'm sorry I didn't come to you sooner. I kept hoping I was wrong. I thanked her. I told her I'd call her back in 10 minutes. Then I hung up, and I sat in my kitchen, and I let the full shape of what she had told me settle over me the way snow settles over a field. Slowly, evenly, until everything I thought I knew was covered in it. And then, underneath that white silence, something else surfaced. Something I had been trying not to look at for 2 years. The conversation that started it was small. That's how these things always start. My father had been sick for 14 months before he died, and in those months, Derek had appointed himself the manager of every family decision. He was the oldest. He had always been the one who handled things. I had told myself that was reasonable. I had told myself grief makes people controlling. I had told myself a lot of things. But there was the afternoon I drove 3 hours to the hospital for a care team meeting I was certain my dad had asked me to attend, only to find Derek already there, alone with the doctors. The meeting apparently started an hour early. I had checked my phone 4 times on the drive up. No messages. Derek had shrugged and said Dad must have got confused about the time. Dad was embarrassed. I told myself he had got confused. There was the email I sent to the estate lawyer that never received a reply, and when I followed up in person 6 weeks later, the lawyer looked at me with something careful in his expression and said he had responded in detail within 48 hours. I searched my inbox for an hour in his waiting room. Nothing. Derek had been copied on the original message. There was the phone call I had with my father in early October, 10 days before he died, when he told me clearly, his voice thin but his mind sharp. He was always sharp right until the end, that he had updated the letter of wishes, that the cottage was mine to keep, that he needed me to know that before anything else happened. When I mentioned this to Derek at the funeral, he looked at me with that particular expression he had been wearing for 2 years by then. Patient. Concerned. Gently bewildered. She gets confused, he said to his wife Sheila, not quietly enough, as though I wasn't standing 4 feet away. She's been like this since Dad got sick. You know how she is. I had swallowed that. I had thanked him for handling the catering. I had driven home and cried for 3 hours and then wondered, genuinely, and with cold terror, whether I had imagined the phone call with my dad, whether my memory was the problem, whether Derek was right and I was unraveling. That is what gaslighting does. It doesn't shout at you. It whispers. It puts its arm around you while it steals your certainty out of your pocket. It wears the face of someone who loves you, and it says you know how you get, and it waits while you agree. Sitting at my kitchen table with Patricia's words still hanging in the air, I understood something that made my hands go completely still. It wasn't grief that had been making me feel like I was losing my mind. It wasn't stress or exhaustion or any of the other explanations I had tried on, like coats that didn't fit. It was Derek. It had always been Derek, and the property wasn't even the beginning of it. The Muskoka Cottage was worth just under $900,000 on the current market. My dad had owned it for 31 years. It was paid off. It sat on 2 acres of waterfront on Lake Rosseau, with a boathouse and a wood-burning fireplace and a dock that groaned exactly the same way it had since I was 8 years old. It was not just money. It was everything my father had loved and built, and I was not going to hand it to my brother because he had spent 2 years convincing me I was too fragile to hold on to anything. I called Patricia back in 8 minutes, not 10. I'm going tomorrow, I said. She was quiet for a moment. I was afraid you'd say that. I need it to end. If I don't show up, he regroups and tries something I don't see coming. I need to finish it on my terms. Another pause. Then, carefully, what do you need from me? What I needed took most of that night to arrange. Patricia connected me with a real estate lawyer named Marcus Webb, who had been practicing in Ontario for 22 years and who, when Patricia explained the situation, agreed to drive to Muskoka the following afternoon with a licensed notary from his firm. I printed 2 copies of the voicemail my father had left me in October. I had saved it. I had saved it because his voice was the thing I was most afraid of forgetting, and Patricia prepared a written statement documenting everything she had found: the fraudulent notary's false license number, the altered property transfer letter, the dates, the discrepancies, the paper trail that Derek had been so careful about and not careful enough. I also called my niece Madison. Madison was 17, Derek's youngest daughter, and she had lived in that family home long enough to understand exactly what her father was. She was not naive about it. She was a teenager who had learned to be invisible in her own house, who texted me sometimes late at night about nothing in particular, which I understood to mean she needed to hear a voice that wasn't performing something. She picked up on the second ring. Aunt, she started, and then stopped, and I could hear her moving somewhere quieter in the house. A door closing. Are you coming tomorrow? I am, I said. But I need to ask you something first, and I need you to know that you don't have to do anything you don't want to do. You can just tell me what you know and leave the rest to me. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Dad has been talking about the cottage for weeks. He keeps saying it's almost over. He gets this look. Madison. I kept my voice steady for her the way Patricia had kept hers steady for me. Is there a folder anywhere in the house with papers about the estate? Anything your dad has been keeping separate from the rest? A long pause. I heard her breathing. I heard the particular silence of a teenager making a decision she can't unmake. In his home office, she said. Top drawer of the filing cabinet. He locks it, but the key is on his keychain. He forgot the copies he made are also in the printer tray. He never checks the printer tray. I asked her to take photographs of anything she found. I told her to delete the messages afterward. I told her she was brave in the specific way I meant it, which was not brave like a soldier, but brave like a person who keeps being honest in a house where honesty is punished. Will you fix this? She asked. Yes, I said. And I meant it the way my father would have meant it. I left at 7 the next morning. The drive north was clear and cold and gray in the way only November in Ontario can manage. The sky, the color of old pewter, the highway carving through stands of birch and pine that had already dropped most of their color. I had the heat turned up and the radio off. I needed to think clearly. I needed to be the version of myself that didn't apologize for taking up space. By the time I reached Highway 11, Madison had sent me 11 photographs. They were blurry in the way of pictures taken in a hurry by someone who was frightened, but they were enough. The printed copies from his printer tray showed the altered letter, with my father's name typed underneath a signature that didn't match the careful, slightly leftward slant he had written in all his life. There was also a cover letter from Derek to the fraudulent notary, with a fee schedule and a date. It was the date that made something cold settle in my chest. It was dated 8 days after my father's diagnosis, before the first surgery, before any of us knew how bad it was going to get. He had started planning this before we knew we were going to lose him. I pulled over at a Tim Hortons outside of Bracebridge and sat in the parking lot for 6 minutes. Then I ordered a large coffee and drove the rest of the way to the lake. The cottage appeared through the tree line the way it always did, that sudden opening in the pines that revealed the water and the dock and the boathouse, and for a moment it was just grief, clean and simple. My dad teaching me to tie a bowline knot on that dock. My dad reading on the screened porch in the rain. My dad saying, you know what, I love about this place, and then not answering, because the whole point was that words weren't sufficient. I parked behind Derek's truck, put my phone on silent, and confirmed one last time that Marcus Webb and his notary were 40 minutes behind me. Derek opened the door before I reached the porch steps. He was wearing the fleece vest he always wore up here, the one our mother had given him 15 years ago, and he was smiling in the way he had learned to smile at me, which was more arrangement than expression, warm but watchful. Concerned but with a quiet readiness underneath it, like a door that opens easily but locks from the inside. You made good time, he said. I was starting to wonder about the roads. Roads were fine, I said. I let some tiredness into my voice. I let him see the overnight bag, the dark circles from a night I hadn't entirely slept. I let him see what he expected to see, because people only question what surprises them. Sheila was inside, standing at the kitchen island with a coffee that she wasn't drinking. She gave me the hug she always gave me, the kind where both people press their cheekbones together and make a sound with their mouths. The notary was already there. He was a small man with a leather portfolio and the slightly overpressed look of someone who wanted to seem official. And when he stood up to greet me, his handshake was soft in a way that practiced authority usually isn't. This is Mr. Fielding, Derek said. He's going to help us get the paperwork sorted today. Nothing complicated, just the last few signatures we need to close out the estate properly. Of course, I said. I sat down at the table. The leather portfolio came out. Mr. Fielding explained the documents in the way that someone explains something they hope you won't read carefully, moving his finger along lines of text while he talked about other lines, keeping up a low-level narration about administrative requirements and transfer timelines, and the importance of finalizing the estate before the new year. I watched his finger, and I listened to his voice, and I thought about my father's handwriting, the way it leaned left, the way the letter D in his name hooked back over itself like it was reconsidering. If you want to go ahead and sign on the markers, Mr. Fielding said, we can have this wrapped up within the hour. I looked at the page in front of me. I looked at page 7. I'd like a few minutes to read through this myself, I said. I kept my voice mild. I kept my face the face of someone who was just being thorough, a little slow maybe, a little cautious the way I always was, the way Derek had always sighed about. Something shifted in the room, not dramatically, just the way a house settles at night when a board contracts. Of course, Derek said. He picked up his coffee. Take your time. I read every page. I took 11 minutes. I counted the seconds that Derek didn't say anything, and Sheila looked at the window, and Mr. Fielding straightened his portfolio twice. When I got to page 7, I read the clause slowly. Then I looked up. I'm going to wait for my lawyer, I said. Derek put his coffee down. You don't have a lawyer here. I do, I said. He's about 30 minutes out. He got held up on the 11. The silence this time was a different quality entirely. That's not necessary, Derek said, and his voice had changed, dropped slightly, the warmth gone from it the way heat leaves a room when a window opens. This is just routine paperwork. You're making this into something it isn't. Am I? I asked. I said it gently. You've been anxious about the estate since Dad passed. That's completely understandable. But you're letting it make you paranoid. This is what Dad wanted. This is how he wanted the property handled. There it was. You're letting it make you paranoid. 2 years of that sentence in different arrangements, and now here it was one last time, placed like a card on a table. I reached into my bag and put a single sheet of paper on the table. It was a printout of the Law Society of Ontario's notary registry, with the name Graham Fielding highlighted. The listing showed a license issued in 1987, a voluntary retirement filed in March 2019, and a date of death recorded in November 2021. Mr. Fielding, I said to the man across from me, I'm not sure what Derek is paying you, but this license belongs to a man who has been dead for 3 years. The room did not move. It went so still that I could hear the lake outside, the low slap of water against the dock, the sound that had been the background of my entire childhood. Derek's face did something complicated and then settled into the thing that was underneath all the other things. The patience was gone. The gentle bewilderment was gone. What was left was something harder and more honest, and in a terrible way I was almost relieved to finally see it. "You don't understand how any of this works," he said. "I understand that this is fraud," I said. "I understand that you've been planning this since before Dad had his first surgery, which I know because of the date on your correspondence with Mr. Fielding, which Madison found in your printer tray last night." Sheila made a sound that wasn't a word. "She's a child," Derek said. "You involved a child in this." "You involved her first," I said. "The day you decided to live this way in front of her. I heard the car before I saw it. 2 cars, actually, the sound of tires on gravel and then doors. And then Marcus Webb was at the cottage door in his coat, with his notary colleague behind him, and they were followed, at a short distance, by 2 OPP officers who Derek had not been expecting and who I had arranged through Patricia the night before on the strength of a fraud complaint she had filed that morning with the documentation Madison had photographed. Marcus placed the real estate documents on the table beside Derek's version. He explained, in the measured and impersonal tone of someone who has done this many times, the difference between the 2 property transfer letters, including the forensic handwriting assessment Patricia had commissioned on an expedited basis, and which clearly indicated the signature on Derek's version, was inconsistent with the authenticated samples of my father's signature, held by the estate lawyer's office. The OPP officers did not shout. They were polite in the particularly Ontario way of being polite, even while informing you that you are the subject of a fraud investigation. Mr. Fielding was the first to understand what was happening. He picked up his leather portfolio and then seemed to realize there was nowhere to take it and set it back down. Derek looked at me for a long time. I looked back. I had loved my brother once, or I had loved the idea of a brother, which is sometimes the same thing until it isn't. And looking at him now, I felt something that wasn't anger and wasn't satisfaction. It was the feeling of finally seeing something clearly that you have been squinting at for a very long time. "Dad wanted me to have it," Derek said. His voice was flat. "Dad wanted me to have it," I said. "I have a voicemail dated October 4th. I have his letter of wishes, the original, signed in his handwriting, witnessed by his palliative care nurse, and filed with his estate lawyer. I have 2 years of documentation that I didn't know I was gathering until last night when it all made sense." "You recorded everything," he said. "Less an accusation than a recognition." "I didn't know I was protecting myself," I said. "I just couldn't stop holding on to things. I used to think that was a flaw." He was asked to step outside. Sheila went with him, and whatever was between them in that moment was theirs to carry. I didn't watch them go. I stood in the cottage kitchen with Marcus and the notary, and I looked out through the window at the lake, which was slate gray and quiet in the November cold, the dock empty, the boathouse door swaying slightly in the wind. Madison texted me from the city, where she had been at school all day, carefully and deliberately, not present, as we had agreed. "Is it over?" I typed back, "Yes." Then, "Are you okay?" She sent back a single emoji, a small green leaf. I wasn't entirely sure what she meant by it, but I kept it. The legal process that followed was not fast or simple, because these things never are. Derek was charged with fraud over $5,000 under the Criminal Code of Canada, and separately with forgery and uttering a forged document. The fraudulent notary cooperated in exchange for reduced charges. Sheila retained her own lawyer and made her own arrangements, and whatever happened inside that marriage after that day was not something I had a window into. The cottage was confirmed as mine. The title transfer was completed by Marcus's notary before we left that afternoon, signed properly and witnessed properly, and registered with the land titles office within the week. I paid the legal fees without complaint. They were a fraction of what I would have lost. I drove home in the dark, which I had not planned on, the highway hypnotic and empty past Barrie, the kind of November dark that feels like the whole world has been turned down to something manageable. I played the voicemail once, just the voicemail, just my father's voice saying what he had said. Then I put it away and drove in silence. The cottage sits empty most of the winter. I go up on long weekends when I can, and I wear my heavy wool socks, and I make coffee in the same pot my father used, and I sit on the screened porch and listen to the ice forming on the lake, which makes a sound like distant thunder if you know to listen for it. Madison stays with me sometimes. She is finishing her last year of high school, and she is figuring out what she wants to be, and when she is at the cottage, she goes quiet in the particular way of people who are finally allowed to be quiet. We don't talk about Derek much. When we do, we say the true things, and then we let them go. It took me a long time to stop second-guessing myself in the way that 2 years of carefully applied doubt had taught me to do. It didn't leave cleanly. Some mornings I still reach for the old uncertainty out of habit, the way you reach for a phone in a pocket after you've switched it to the other side. But it gets lighter. The ground under my feet gets more reliable. What I know now is this. My father raised 2 children, and one of them decided that what mattered in a family was the estate, and one of them decided it was the dock and the fireplace and the way the boathouse door swings in the wind. He knew which one of us he trusted with it. He put it in writing in his own handwriting that leaned left like it was always reconsidering, and the fact that someone tried to take it doesn't unmake what he left behind. Protecting what is yours is not the same as being greedy. Knowing your own memory is not the same as being paranoid. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for the people inside a broken family is to stop pretending the break isn't there. The cottage is mine. The door still needs repainting. The dock still groans in the same place it always did. I'm keeping all of it exactly as it is.